Welcome to our Best Friends Digital Community Power Hour on Strategic Animal Control. We have Scott Giacopo here with us, our Director of National Shelter Outreach. We're so excited that you've been willing to take an hour of your time to spend some time with us and with him. My name's Amy Charlton. I'm the Digital Community Manager. I just want to cover where you can ask questions. We'd love for you to have those questions come in all throughout the presentation. Scott's definitely willing to take those questions as he moves through the presentation. So if you look at your right-hand panel, towards the bottom, there's a section that says questions. If you click on the arrow, which makes it turn down, that's where you can type in your questions via chat. We have two facilitators, myself and Ray Greenbaum, who will help rise those questions to the surface for Scott and pause him here and there so he knows that your questions are coming in. If we need to do any engaging back and forth, we can unmute you so that you can respond back to him if necessary. But we do have the audience on mute as a whole, since there's 20 some odd of you in there, just so we don't talk over the top of each other. So the question section is where you're going to want to submit any questions that you have at any point throughout the presentation. So I will turn it over to Scott. Take it away.
Great, thank you, Amy. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here today. I want to give a little bit of background and just let you know a little bit about myself. In addition to being the Director of National Shelter Outreach, which I've been with Best Friends now for over a year, and my primary role is working with municipal agencies, particularly animal control, and helping them reach the next level, so to speak. Prior to that, I was the Chief of Community Animal Welfare in Washington, D.C., which means I was basically the Chief Animal Control Officer for Washington, D.C. And I did that for the past 10 years, and that's really where I got a good look at how animal control works and how it can, again, move to the next level and progress. And prior to that, I was in Massachusetts as a state police cruelty investigator with the Massachusetts SPCA. I did that for too many years to mention, we'll say. So as I said, when I was in DC, I got a really close look at how animal control operates, and looking at how we can move forward and so forth. And that's really where this presentation comes from. It's really one of my passions. As crazy as that might sound, I'm very proud to work in animal control. I think it's a very noble profession. I think that we, for too long, have been the low man on the totem pole, and in the city government, funding, the whole 9 yards. And I think that we sometimes contribute to that as officers, as members of animal control. I think we contribute to that because we look at ourselves that way, and I think that time has come and gone. It's something that when we project how we feel about ourselves and our profession, we can then get the community to start feeling the same way. So I want to start just a little bit with talking about where animal comes from, where animal control comes from, because that's really where the image of animal control where it's found. Back in the 1800s, we were dog catchers, and that's where the term comes from. We existed just to stop the spread of rabies. We were paid by the dogs we caught to go out and just round them up, and we just killed them. We didn't do anything beyond that. We weren't focused on long-term solutions. We weren't focusing on anything other than dogs. We were really underfunded by the local government, and we were viewed poorly by the community. And that's something that still holds true. Is we are not seen in the same light that we should be. And back in the 1800s, when rabies started up, it was the Department of Health, the Board of Health in local communities, particularly. I think it started in New York, where the health department wanted to stop the spread of rabies, so they hired these guys to just go out and round up dogs, and they were paid by the number of dogs they picked up, and that led to people stealing dogs, people not returning dogs to their owners, and they were basically just put into a large cage and then lowered into the East River and drowned. And so that's really where we got the term dog catcher. Incidentally, I know anyone who works in the field probably feels details the same way, but I hate that term. I hate being called a dog catcher. I hate, the connotation that comes with it. It's just not who we are today. And where we've come to, where we've grown and progressed, our role is so much more than just rounding up dogs. We're still, obviously that is still a major function in animal control, is, protect the public from the spread of rabies, and not only dogs, but, all animals, all rabies vectors. We're also there to protect the public from dangerous animals. We're also now more involved with protecting animals from people. We all, know what can go on out there and what happens with, people abusing animals and so forth, and that's our role now. We deal with a variety of species, and we do rescues. Our role is really now to solve problems for the long term. We should be mitigating nuisance complaints. People have problems with community cats and wildlife, and they, nuisance complaints. We shouldn't just be going out there and clearing the call. And I'm going to get a lot more into that as we go on. But as you can see from the list, our role has really progressed, really moved forward. And it's something that, has brought us to a new profession, and we are a profession. Nowadays, we have a national trade organization, the National Animal Care and Control Association, NACA, which, but incidentally, I am on the board of directors for. We have, state-of-the-art equipment in many places, and many places we still, need more. But we are a profession, and we have grown as an industry, as a profession, and we take it seriously. Not only have we as a profession grown, but society has changed. The society that we used to deal with is long gone. And nowadays, 68% of American households have at least one pet. So we're more apt to find a home with a pet than not. Spending on companion animals over $62 billion in 2017, and that's an amazing amount of money. And nowadays, people consider these animals part of their family. They're not just they're not just something that you get and you toss in the backyard. I understand that does still occur. I'm not saying it doesn't, but for the most part, they're part of our family, and people see that. And with that, people expect us to have humane values and humane practices in animal control, and they expect us to make every effort we can to help that animal, and not just round them up and kill them as we used to. And those, we've done studies. There's been national studies done with community cats in particular that say people would rather have us, the great majority of people would rather have us do TNR than kill them. And I know a lot of you out there who have knocked on those doors and have talked to the people who are experiencing those nuisance complaints, might disagree with that number, because we're only dealing with the negatives. We're only dealing with the people who are having conflicts and problems, and that goes with a lot of animals, not just community cats, but wildlife and dogs. And we only deal with people who are experiencing problems, and at that point they do want us to take action. They just want us to solve the problem. But when you can talk to them in a reasonable manner, or when they're not having a conflict, the majority of people don't want us to kill these animals anymore. Society is also now expects more transparency. They want us to be accountable for what they do, for what we do. They want their tax dollars spent wisely on programs that are more in line with their values and their beliefs. And there's a higher level of social consciousness. I remember when I first started out. Now, I first started working in an animal shelter in 1988, and back then in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a high number of euthanasia going on. And people would always say, "Oh, I don't want to know what's going on in the shelter," and I know, but I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see it. And they turn a blind eye to it, so to speak. And those days are gone. Social media has changed the landscape out there for us, and that that's evident. And I know a lot of you out there have seen, have been the victims of social media attacks, and where we have been, called all sorts of names and murderers and all that. And, people just don't want us to do that anymore. They expect more of us. And frankly, I think we should expect more of us, of ourselves. And I think with that, what we really need is a whole new mindset, completely a whole new mindset altogether. We need to stop doing things that we know doesn't work. If, for instance, I'm a big advocate for TNR and community cats. And for decades, animal control has been rounding up community cats and killing them, as a means to try and solve the population problem. It doesn't work. It never has. It never will. We know that, but yet we keep doing the same thing. And that's why I have a picture up here of my friend Albert Einstein, because his definition of insanity was, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And that's what we've been doing, with a lot of programs, and I'm going to go through some other ones that are well known, and some of them which might even make you stop and be surprised at some of my thoughts. But we do a lot of things because it's what we've always done. And we don't know any different, or we feel we don't have the time to do any different. We need to start being more proactive rather than reactive. And again, any officer knows we go out and we just clear calls. That's our role. In a lot of places, all we do is we get the call, we respond to it and we clear it. And that's our biggest thing, is we'll go out, and as long as we can clear this call, we'll move on to the next. But we know that we're going to be back. We know that the problem's not solved, but yet we don't have the time to stop and start being more proactive and think about how to solve these problems, which there are ways of doing that. There are ways of looking at what calls we're responding to and what we should and shouldn't be responding to. That'll give us more time and give us the time we need to do all of these things. And the community, they're used to the way we used to do it, but we're the experts, and a lot of people don't think of it that way, or they don't stand up and say, no, this isn't how to solve your problem. We're the experts. We know how to solve these problems. We're going to solve it. We want to solve it, and we know you want to solve it, but you have to trust us and do what we think is what we know to be the answer. And we need to get them to understand that. And the only way we're going to do that is by standing up and being firm and not backing down to them. I mean, how many times have we gone to a house and someone says, that cat is causing a nuisance, whatever, spraying on my house or jumping up on my car, or doing X, doing Y, and I just want him gone. And we know that that's not going to solve the problem, yet we do what they tell us to do. And we would never in a million years allow tell a police officer how to conduct an investigation, or a firefighter how to put out a fire, or an EMT how to treat a patient. We would never do that. But yet we tell animal control how to do their jobs. And like I said earlier, I think we need to start looking at ourselves differently, and we need to start looking at ourselves more in the line of police, fire, EMT, all these valuable services that are provided to the community. We need to start doing that. And we need to start looking at things in a more strategic way. We need to start looking at things like, okay, here's a problem. How do we solve it? Rather than just keep running out and clearing calls and running around putting out fires, as it's mostly called. We need to start looking at how we can direct our limited resources to actually solve problems. And that's really where, a lot of agencies are moving towards. And, when we think about solving problems, it brings me right out of the gate to looking at whether or not we are enforcing the law and just running around writing citations and taking animals from people, or are we actually helping people? Because when we actually help people, we provide assistance rather than enforcement, we actually start solving problems. And I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination, I'm not saying we shouldn't be writing citations, because sometimes it does call for it. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be impounding animals, because again, sometimes it does call for it, but it shouldn't be our go-to. It shouldn't be our immediate response. Anytime I went out on a call, I looked at it as though I'm not going to write a citation unless you make me write you a citation. If I've been out to the same house and this person's just not listening and not doing what needs to be done, and not, there's no way he's accepting my assistance and all that, then yeah, we got no choice but to use the law, and that's what we have. But I think we're all too often looking at going in that route to begin with. And when we do, sometimes we penalize people that might not have the resources. Now, I was at a local shelter recently, a local animal control agency, where a dog had gotten out of his yard. And the owner automatically called, and he was at work, and they said, yeah, he's here. The guy couldn't get out of work in time because they stopped, they shut down at 5 o'clock, which is a problem in and of itself. They weren't able to, be open during hours where they could reclaim the animals after work. But this guy had to take off time the next day to come pick up his dog, and it cost him a boatload of money. And some people don't have that money, so they choose just not to reclaim the animal. And we all know what happens then. They go out and they get another one. So we get stuck with the animal. The animal gets stuck in a system he doesn't belong. He had a good home, but just because the people didn't have the money to pay for sterilization, for license, vaccination, the impound fees, the citation fees, all of that, we're penalizing them, and the animal ends up, we and the animal are the ones that really suffer from it. Sometimes we penalize people because they don't have the information. And I don't think of myself as like when I talk to people, I don't educate people. I'm not a teacher. They're not my student. I know that's a lot of the terminology we use. We need to provide education. We need to educate them on proper pet ownership and all that. But if any of you are familiar with the Pets for Life program that is run out of the Humane Society of the United States, they came up with a concept of sharing information rather than educating. And when you do that, it puts you on a different plane with that person. It's not condescending. It's not teacher to pupil. It's two adults. One has information, the other doesn't, and we're just sharing information. And that relationship that you build with that person is much different than that of an educator or a teacher versus pupil. So my big thing is I don't educate. I educate kids. I go in and I do dog bite prevention programs for kids, and that's part of my role as an ACO. But when I'm talking to someone about resolving problems, I'm not educating. I'm sharing information that'll help them solve their problem. When we just go out and write citations, we're actually creating animosity between us and the community, whether it's the person receiving the citation or it's the person, and I keep going back to community cats. As I said earlier, I'm a big TNR advocate. And one of the things that ACOs don't realize is when we get a nuisance complaint on a cat and we go out and we remove that cat, there are people in that community that care for that cat. And those caregivers love that animal no different than we love our animals that we share our households with. And when we remove that animal, we're temporarily we're clearing that call. We're temporarily clearing that call from that nuisance, because we all know another cat's going to follow in its footsteps. But what happens is we make that one person happy for a small period of time at the expense of all of those people who really care about that cat and who are feeding that cat. And what happens is they don't call the mayor saying they're not solving my problem or anything like that. They go out on Facebook and they start calling us cat killers and dog catchers, and they start hating animal control. And we end up the bad guys just because we just took this cat. We just didn't want to deal with the problem. We just took the cat. And we did so at the expense of these other people, and it creates animosity within the community. And half the time when we do enforcement and we impound an animal, or they can't come back to come to the shelter to reclaim it, we increase the shelter intake and the euthanasia, obviously, and they usually get an animal from somewhere else. And we know that to be the case. This isn't a scientific study that was done, and I'm not a scientist. I'm not an academic. I'm just a guy who worked in the streets for years, and I know, and anyone who's listening today and who's ever heard me say this, you all know they're going to get another animal. That's how it works. They're going to become reluctant to ask for help until it's too late. They're not going to be your friend. They're not going to see you in the street and say, "Hey, I got a problem. Can you help me?" They're going to hide from you. They're just going to wait until it's too late. And as I said, we're not solving the problem. We're just clearing the call. We're just going out and clearing it so we can move on. And someone else is going to have to deal with it. And we're going to be back. Anyone out there listening, how many times have you been to the same house for the same problem? And I know all of you are out there just shaking your head. Yeah, been there, done that. It happens all the time. And that's what happens when we focus our efforts on enforcement rather than helping people. Well, but when we start focusing on helping people, and this is a great photo. This is an ACO in Tucson, Arizona, Pima County, and they have an awesome program. And each of their trucks, they have a toolkit. And this picture is an ACO helping a pet owner fix a fence because the dog kept getting out, and the pet owner, the dog owner, didn't know how to keep the dog in the yard. He couldn't fix the fence, so the officer just broke out his toolkit and fixed the fence. That's solving a problem. So when we focus on helping people rather than enforcing, just being an enforcement officer, we're solving the problems for the long term. This guy's not going to have to go back to this house. It helps keep those animals in the home where they belong. They don't belong in the shelter. They have a good home, and we'll keep them out of the shelter. It helps the owners better understand their animals' needs. It helps them build a relationship with the pet and the neighbors in the neighborhood. It helps build relationships. It helps keep everybody from fighting and bickering, and we don't have to get involved. And it helps build positive relations within the community and animal control. And that's really a key, is having those relationships, being able to talk to people and being that, I hate to use the phrase, but, being officer friendly and, talking to people and helping people. It helps build those relationships that we need in the community. One of the other ways we do that is through community outreach. And one of the things that has always gotten to me is when people talk about community outreach, they think it's a buzzword or a PR stunt or a fad, but it's not. It's all about becoming part of the community you serve. And as I said before, and I've said it a few times, I believe in animal control as a valuable public service. We are public servants. We have an obligation to solve problems. And I think we have an obligation, our obligation, to help people who love animals, hate animals, or don't care about them. Either way, we have an obligation to our community, and being a part of that community and showing that we're here to help solve those problems and make life better for them in a place that we care about as much as they do. To me, that's really what community outreach is all about at its core. That we're part of the community and we care about that community and solving those problems and making it a better place for everybody. Whether you love them, hate them, don't care, whatever, we should be able to solve those problems and make it a better place. And there are so many opportunities for community outreach, most of which we walk by every day. We don't even realize it, and there are some obvious ones, like, when there's a health fair or a county fair, or, the shelter or local animal clinic offers a vaccination clinic, being there, being in uniform, being meeting animals and talking to people and, going to the neighborhood meetings. When I was in DC, we had it was mandatory once a month that you did this, but you also had the opportunity to put in a request for it. And my officers got overtime for doing it. And there are these neighborhood meetings all over the place in every community, whatever they're called. In DC, they were the area neighborhood commissions, and then there were the police service area numbers, and the neighborhood crime watch meetings. They're everywhere. And my officers got to go. And whether they were presenting, which was ideal, being able to stand up in front of the group and talk about, animal care and animal laws and, responsible pet ownership, yada, 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 dog bite prevention, the whole 9 yards, or just being present at them, not even having to talk, just being there, talking to people. I always used to say, sit in the back and drink the coffee and enjoy the light refreshments that are always offered at these things. Just be there, be present. And another thing that we used to do in DC that I really liked was, going to dog parks and not writing citations, not complaining to people about their dogs need to be licensed or vaccinated or anything like that. Just grab a box of biscuits and a tennis ball and go into the dog park and hand out biscuits, toss a ball around, and talk to people. Just get to know the community, get to know the dogs in the community. People will, once they start liking you, they're going to start working with you. They want these problems solved too, whether it's aggressive dogs running loose, whether it's a dog fight, someone who's doing dog fighting in the community or abusing animals or whatever. They're more apt to provide you with information if they trust you and know you and like you. And these are the types of things that we don't do every day. I know all of you are saying I don't have time for that, and I'm clearing all these calls and blah blah blah. We're going to get to that in a minute. But when we take the opportunity to build these relationships, like stopping by a local animal shelter, animal hospital, stopping into the local vet clinic and giving your business card out, just saying, hey, or, introducing yourself and talking to them, getting to know the people at the front desk, getting to know the vets, doing that with other shelters in your area, and even groomers. And I throw this in there because I'm a big fan of being getting good relationships with area groomers, because I had a situation where I did that. I would stop by the local groomers and they all knew me, and I got to hang out with them and know them and spend 5-10 minutes in there meeting them and meeting the animals they were working on and so forth. But then I had a situation where I had an elderly woman whose dog, we've all had them, I'm sure, whether it's a dog or a cat, but the situation I'm referring to was a dog. There was an elderly woman with a small dog, and the mats were just horrible, and she couldn't do it herself. And some cases, you might take that animal to the shelter to be groomed, or you may, even impound the animal for whatever reason. They're saying that they can't take care of the animal, so you impound it. But when you have a relationship, I remember I went to the groomers and I said, hey, I got the situation where, the woman had a dog that was all matted. They actually went to her house and groomed the dog for us, free. So it's like building up those relationships. They want to help, they want to do something, and just having that bond and that relationship showed that they wanted to help, and they did. And that was how I cleared that call. Local dog trainers, when you get certified as a dog trainer, in order to do that, you need to have a certain amount of volunteer hours in group classes. And being able to talk to some of these people and setting up, helping them to set up in a local rec center or a local park or what have you, free dog training sessions, something like that. That shows the community that you care, and you got to be there when you do it, at least make an appearance. It shows that you care, and it shows that you're helping, and you are actually helping to solve problems. Going to the Humane Society events, coffee shops, just going in. One of the things I always hated, and I see this all too often, is when officers are in their trucks and they stop at lunch, for lunch or coffee or whatever, they go through the drive-through. And gosh, I don't like that, man. I say, get the heck out of the truck and go into the building and meet people, talk to people while you're standing in line. People are looking at you and ask you questions, and just be, I hate to say this, but officer friendly, talking to people. Things like that really do make a difference. And when they see you, they get to know you. And, just being out on the street, talking to people. I knew an officer that when he came out of a building, or an apartment building or a house, he made a beeline for his truck so fast that if anyone was out there, no one would get the chance to talk to him. He got in the truck, had the windows rolled up, he eyes forward, drove away. It's like, look at all the opportunities you're missing by not talking to these people. So when I get in the truck with them, it's like, roll down the windows, talk to people, slow down. We were giving out in DC, we had these little stickers, little for kids, junior ACO stickers that were, kids really liked them, and we were giving them out. We were talking to people, and just being that present, being present in the streets, talking to people. And then there's online. We don't take into consideration all of the online, the Facebook, the neighborhood Facebook pages, the Nextdoor, this nextdoor.com, where everybody's jumping on, getting on there and looking for things about animals. They're always on there and talking to people and putting things out there. It just makes sense, and it really helps. It really helps us, build those relationships within the community. And by doing that, it makes people look at us in a different light. We're no longer the dog catchers that are just out to round up animals and kill them, and I don't know anyone who wants that impression of themselves out in the community. They start looking at us as though we're here to solve the problems, and they want to work with us to solve those problems. And before I go on to talking about data, I just want to talk a little bit about, where do we get all the time for this? And, I think, and I see it all too often, is that, animal control agencies think that they're mandated to respond to certain types of calls and do certain things, whether it's because they're mandated to do it, or they think no one else will do it, we got to do it. So one of the things I always recommend when I do assessments is to take a look at what types of calls you are responding to and list them all out. And then go back and see what you're mandated to look at. And I get it, dangerous animals, dog bites, animal cruelty, all of that stuff we do have to look at. But are we required to go out and pick up DOAs? Are we required to do it? We may do it as a public service for the city, but is that something we can talk to the Department of Transportation or Sanitation and have them do it? There are a couple of things that I don't believe animal control should be responsible for. One of them, and this is a personal opinion, and you may disagree, but one of them is barking dogs. I don't believe it's an animal control issue. I think barking dogs is a disturbing the peace issue. And when I was in DC, I was able to talk to the Metropolitan Police Department. Wasn't easy, but they agreed that they would take all of our barking dog complaints. So we wiped that call volume right out of our stats. We didn't have to worry about barking dog. Now, if an officer went out there and said that the dog was barking because it was in distress, then we would get called in as a distress situation. Or if a dog was barking and it was a weather emergency, yeah, we would take those calls. But on average, a run-of-the-mill barking dog complaints is disturbing the peace. It's not animal control. Picking up DOAs, I just don't believe that's something we should be doing. Picking up owner surrendered animals in the field, unless it's extenuating circumstances like the dogs, the animals aggressive or sick or injured. And sick or injured, I think animal control should be responding to sick or injured animals. That's a different story. But if someone has a dog that they just don't want to bring to the shelter, or they don't feel they have time to bring to the shelter, why should it be an officer's job to be their errand boy? And that's the way I look at it. I'm sorry if you do it, but I look at it, and that's the way we used to do this thing in DC, pick up give ups, we called them. And any time of day or night, 24/7, you could call DC Animal Control and have an officer just come pick up your animal. We wouldn't ask why you were surrendering it. We wouldn't do all of that. We would just ask for your address, and we would send an officer out. I mean, talk about not utilizing resources to their full extent. We would send an officer out to do the pickup and then bring them into the shelter. I just think that's crazy, folks. It's their pet. They should be responsible for bringing the animal into the shelter if they can't take it anymore. Now, again, there are extenuating circumstances. Nothing's black and white. The other thing, and this is something that is probably going to be really controversial, and I haven't pushed it, but I don't believe we should be responding to your average run-of-the-mill dogs running at large. They're causing a public nuisance, a public safety threat, yes. Running in traffic, yes. Acting aggressively, yes. Hanging around a schoolyard, maybe, yeah, I get it. But if they're just running down the street, I don't think we should be wasting our time trying to find them. And I'll challenge anyone out there, look at your stats and take the number of calls that you've responded to for running at large, and then look to see how many of those you actually found the dog and they're not outcomed as GOA. And we all, animal control is great with acronyms. We use acronyms all over the place. And GOA, gone on arrival, how many of those are there? And I'm willing to bet it's more than not. So we spin our wheels going out when the dog is just running the neighborhood and went home. Now, if we can identify who that dog is and who owns that dog, fine. Let's go talk to the owner and talk to them, find out why they're doing that, and offer advice on, how to keep them confined or keep them, being able to walk on leash. But generally speaking, I think we're wasting a lot of time that we could be using in better ways by by not responding to just general running at large calls, loose dog calls. Which brings me to the next part of this presentation, using data. I think that all too often we don't look at our data, and I know the shelters are using it. They're using it for their adoption rates and their save rates, and all of this data that's being used. But I don't think field services is using it the way we should. And we really should. We could be doing some amazing things out there if we just start looking at what we should be doing rather than running around like putting out fires and clearing calls. And I'm not a data geek. I love data now, but if you look at, this is what using data is all about. And I'll give you a second just to read that. But it gives us the opportunity to really look at what problems are happening and where they're happening. And that's key. So using data, the first thing we want to do is, what data do we collect? And my take on it is everything. Let's try and gather every piece of information we can, the number of calls responded to. And just, out there, think to yourself, do you know your stats as an animal control officer or director? Do you know how many calls you are responding to each year? I was shocked when part of my role with Best Friends is I go around the country and I do field operations assessments, kind of like a shelter assessment, but I do it for field. And I'm shocked at how many people don't know their annual call volume. I think you need to know that, because you need to know when calls are up, when calls are down, and so forth. And the type of calls that you are responding to, broken down extensively. I'm talking about, not just saying it's a cruelty call, but what kind of cruelty? Failure to provide food, failure to provide medical, physical abuse, neglect, across the board. Break them down, track that information. And of course, the outcomes. Like I said, the acronyms DOA, and GOA, gone on arrival. It's amazing if you're not tracking it. If you start tracking it, you'd be amazed at what the percentage of animals gone on arrival that you go out to look for, and how much time we're wasting. Doing call volume by shift, by days. What days are the most busy? What times are the most busy? And that's when you'll be able to look at your scheduling. That's how we look at that's how we did our scheduling. It's, which days and which times are more busy than others. You'd be surprised at what you think. You can't rely on anecdotal information because it's not always accurate. And animal intake. How many animals are you taking in, and how what species, and the reasons, and how many bite cases? Everything. Just track it. And location. Track where these animals are coming from and where you're being dispatched out to, and run reports. Run report after report. Get to know your data. And we're going to talk a little bit more in the next couple of slides about what to do with that data. But the benefits that a lot of people don't realize is that you'll be able to use this to get more staffing. If you go to city council or your mayor's office or however you get your municipal funding from, and you say, wow, I have 6 officers and we're running 18,000 calls a year, that says a lot, but it doesn't say it all. But if you can say, hey, I have 6 officers and we're running calls, and here's a number of bite cases we're responding to. Here's a number of BS calls we're running to. Here's a number of running at large and bite cases and sick or injured and wildlife conflicts and all that. You can break it down and show them where they're happening, what's happening, and where. You'll get a better response from city council, especially if on the next slide I'm going to show you some mapping. If you can go to that city council member and say, Well, this is, this is your district or your ward or whatever, however they break it down, and we're running around like crazy in your ward. We need more money to protect your citizens and to help your citizens. So here's some mapping. Here's a map that we did in Washington, D.C. It's a heat map, and gosh, I wish I had the Arizona ones. They were okay. Sorry, I got sidetracked for a second. When you start collecting data, you can see the heat. You can see where the calls are coming in from, more than any other. So I think this is stray cases and bite cases for Washington D.C. in a certain time period. I think it was a 2-month time period or a quarter, back in 2011 or 12, and you can see where the yellow is. Those are the areas that we need to start dedicating resources to. We need to get in there and start doing more. That would be more reactive, because that's where our biggest numbers are coming from. But if you look at some of these areas where they're getting red, they're building up. Those are the ones where you want to start doing some proactive stuff. And I'll give you an example. I'm working with a city right now where they want to start doing stuff like this, and they're looking at, this area here is going to be the next hot spot for bite cases. They have a large number of stray reports. They have a large number of violations that are coming in. They're going out and they're picking up a lot of strays from this area, but it hasn't reached a point where there are a lot of bites. So what they're going to do is they're going to start, that's where you go into the schools and you dedicate your dog bite prevention resources to. Because if you weren't looking at this, you might go down to an area where there's no calls coming in regarding bites, but you're still going in because you have this canned dog bite prevention kit that you want to get into the schools, and you go into the wrong schools. It's not gonna help as much. And teaming up with the post office and the police department, the fire department, talking to them, saying, hey, when you see something that looks like it might be a problem, or if you see dogs, if people that tend to let their dogs out, you got to let us know so that we can keep these numbers down. And that's really what it's all about in regards to allocating your resources. It's knowing where to allocate the resources and being creative. How often have any of you gone to your local post office and talked to the postal carriers about, hey, what's going, who's assigned to this neighborhood? We'll say, using DC, I'll say, who's assigned to Adams Morgan? Going in there saying, hey, we're having a situation in Adams Morgan. We're afraid it's going to start getting worse. What can you tell me about that area? And even stopping them on the street and talking to them, giving them your card, saying, hey, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, dogs that when you walk up to a house, the fence is rickety, and you're afraid that dog's going to get out. I want to know about those cases. There's nothing to complain about, but I want to know about them. I want to go out and talk to that person and see how we can help them fix their fence and take better control of their dog. Talking to the police department, when you guys are out clearing calls and addressing calls, we want to know about the animal issues in this particular neighborhood. Help us, be a partner with us. Go to roll calls. Go to the neighborhood meetings. That's where you want to go, to those neighborhood meetings. And when you do, you focus on dog bite prevention. And I'm just using dog bite prevention because it's the easiest, and it's the easiest one to start with. That's the first one out of the gate. If you've never done this before, look at your dog bite stuff. That's the easiest stuff to deal with. And going out and talking about dog bite prevention, there's a lot of resources out there that you can start sharing with people, and bringing those other people, those other agencies in, whether it's code enforcement, police, fire, postal, neighborhood influencers next door, going hog wild on all of this different stuff. That's where you start seeing numbers start coming down, and you prevent it from becoming a hot spot. So the next thing you want to start looking is, how do we tie all this together? And we want to analyze the data to determine where the problems are, and devising a strategy. Like I said, be creative, collaborate, get everyone involved, going out and get out of the trucks and get into those areas and start talking to people in the street and in the coffee shops, and just start talking to people. As you can tell, I'm a big coffee advocate, especially during the day. I stop, as most of you do. I love getting my coffee every day, and same thing. Get out of the truck, talk to people. Offer up information rather than a citation where appropriate. We have to maintain officer discretion, but going out and looking at those places, like I was talking about with the postal carriers, saying that, hey, there's a fence, and it's every time the dog hits the fence, it shakes, and I'm worried about one of these days it's just going to rot through or break through, and he's going to come through. Go out there, offer to help, tell them how to help, and don't forget to ask for help. How can members of the community help us? Where are these problems occurring? How do you know this person? Can you tell them you had a great experience with us and that we helped them, or whatever. But we shouldn't be above asking the community for help in certain areas. And we got to be present. The only way we're going to do that is by being present, and getting out there and going to those meetings and being a part of the community. And that's really what it's really what makes a difference, and it makes a difference in the community. And you'll see once you start doing this that your call volume might peak a little bit, because people will be like, oh, they want to help, so the real calls will start going up a little bit, but then people will start talking and start helping themselves and helping their neighbors out, and the call volume will start dropping. And most importantly, in the BS calls that we shouldn't be responding to. When we first gave up, when we first stopped doing that pickup give up, it was a little bit of a problem. People were calling and fighting with the dispatchers and the officers, and it was a little bit of a headache. But after a while, it calmed down. People knew that it wasn't a service we provided, and we were only providing services that were necessary and that were relevant to what we do to help the community. And so that's something that I've seen firsthand. I've seen it happen. And now that I'm working with agencies all over the country, and I'm seeing them doing the same thing. I'm not saying I invented this by any stretch of the imagination, but there are departments out there that have been doing this for a while. And they don't have those attacks on Facebook. They aren't viewed in the community as the dog catchers and someone to hide their animals from, or so forth. They're part of the community, and that's really what this is all about. So that's pretty much the end of my presentation. This presentation I just did is based off of a larger presentation that is it's basically a 2.5-hour presentation that goes more in depth into how to do a lot of this, and I'd be more than interested if anyone is interested in finding out more. I hope to be doing webinars on this as we go forward, and maybe even another one of these power hours. But I'd love to hear your thoughts out there, and if you have any questions.
We do have one that came in. Did I interrupt somebody? Did someone else have a chime in? No? Okay. We do have a question about what software they can use for the heat map and possible cost information, if you happen to know that offhand.
Yeah, there's a lot of different options. That's a great question. There's a lot of different options with software. One, Chameleon has a built-in feature, and talk to your Chameleon rep if you are using Chameleon. They'll be more than happy to show you how to do it. The other one, a lot of agencies don't have any, and a lot of agencies just use an Excel sheet, and that can be downloaded. And there's an article I wrote with Jason Smith from Chameleon on how to do it just using Google Earth. It's free. And again, I'm not a techie guy, but we can certainly help you with that. I know, Amy, we had talked about getting this article either up on our website or out to some of the participants who are interested. But yeah, there's a way of doing it through Google Earth. There are, a lot of communities. If you're a municipal agency, a lot of communities already have GIS systems in place for their city. And talking to the city's IT department may be able to give you that opportunity to download, export your information and download it right into theirs. We had in DC, we never really took advantage of it. But DC has a GIS, a pretty extensive GIS system, where they even had a page where a map where they picked up the Department of Sanitation picked up dead animals, dead animal pickup by species, and you could go in and see, okay, these are where all the dogs were picked up. And if you overlay that, you could actually do an overlay with your maps, overlay on running at large cases and bite cases, and and all that. It's really fun. looking at it. But first thing, if you're a municipal agency, first thing I'd do is I would check with my city. If you have Chameleon, I would check with Chameleon. I would talk to my Chameleon rep. And then if not, then start looking at the Google Earth, and that's free. It's not as good as the Chameleon stuff. It's not as good as it's certainly not as good as the high-powered GIS systems that most municipalities use. But you can do it. It's easy.
Thanks, Scott.
Sure.
I know you said you were hoping you had Pima County's heat maps. Do you have any, even though we don't have those right in front of us right now, that's totally okay. Do you have any specifics around when Pima County utilized those heat maps and anything they did proactively based on that data and any outcomes they saw? Can you remember any of that offhand to share?
Yeah, I don't know the stats off the top of my head. I think it would be doing a disservice to do that. But the one map that I wish I had inserted into this, and I do apologize. And Amy, I don't know if we can insert it before we send this out or post it or anything. I'd love to get that up there. But
Absolutely.
Thank you. That was my mistake to not add that. But what they did is they had done pretty much what I said about the DC heat maps, only it was more, you could see the incidences a lot better on their maps than my maps. And they, in a month's time period, they took a zip code, one zip code, and they put they did 3 maps. One was leash law violations, one was stray calls, and one was bites. And you looking at these maps, you would really be like, wow, look at this neighborhood. It's like there's incidences and severity, severe instances, and you could see it. And then on the other side of the neighborhood, the other side of the zip code, you could see where it was becoming a hot spot. It was a lot better visual than the maps that I used. And folks, I do apologize for that. That was my mistake when I was building out this presentation. I did insert, I did neglect to insert that
No worries.
slide.
We'll get it to him for sure.
Yeah.
You have another question. This is coming in from Matthew Bailu. He says he might have missed you saying this, but that you mentioned not believing in doing the routine dog at large calls. And so he wanted to know, have you been a part of an agency that did something like this, and how was it launched and how did it work?
The answer is no. I have not been able to find an agency or been involved in an agency that has taken that off of their plates yet. And the reason, I think the reason is that, right now we're looking at taking off other calls that are more easily bought into by the general public. When we start saying things like we're not going to respond to dogs just running down the street, that is going to require a strategy. That's going to require having the trust in the community, in the government officials, that we know what we're talking about. I think that's more of an advanced strategy. But out of the gate, not responding to barking dogs, not responding to DOAs, those are the ones that, I think you should be going after first. And so if you don't, as you're building those relationships and showing the community and showing the government officials that, hey, this is what animal control should and shouldn't be doing, that's like the low hanging fruit. And once you get to that point, that's when I think we should start looking at that. It's not a widely accepted concept, I guess, of not responding to those. Most people think that that's what animal control should be doing. But I'd love to see that day. I'd love to see that day.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.
Matthew, I did unmute you. Did that answer your question, or did you have anything to follow up with Scott so that you can clarify anything?
I think that answered my questions. I did want to run one more question by you, Scott, if I could.
Absolutely.
Our agency has recently looked at, we're in Memphis, and we've recently spoken with Nashville, and they've got a program in place where they don't do quarantine on bites. They pretty much throw the responsibility back in the hands of the dog owner. How do you feel about that as far as looking at that? We're looking at it from a space perspective, but also too in trying to figure out ways to kind of reduce the amount of call volumes, because we do get quite a few bites here in Memphis, in which we run into situations where quite often owners are not coming to get their dogs, or they can't afford the fees for the boarding and other things and other factors such as that when it comes time to reclaim their dog at the end of the quarantine. So unfortunately, we're looking at, as much as I hate to say it, having to euthanize a dog that was probably a pretty decent family dog. It just got involved in an incident where it just ended up biting somebody.
Yeah, and just to let you know, I love Lauren Bluestone, who runs Nashville. They have a great team over there, and a lot of agencies are leaning more towards the in-home quarantine. And first of all, it depends on your city ordinance, and state laws and so forth. So I don't want to recommend violating any of those, obviously. But if you have a situation where the owners can confine that animal safely, the dog doesn't pose a threat to public safety, yeah, you should very well be able to quarantine that dog at home at free of charge. And you can also, one of the other things too is having them bring the animal to the shelter so that someone at the shelter can do the initial rabies check. You know how at the beginning of a quarantine, an officer has to go out, look at the dog, make sure it's, not sick or rabid, and then we come back 10 days later or however long. Have them bring the animal to the shelter, save that call, or to their vet if they have to go get a rabies booster. Why can't you just take the vet as being the initial point of contact for the rabies? We used to do that in DC.
Okay.
Where we would try and get them to come into the shelter, or have a veterinarian if they were going for that, just saying, yeah, the dog was seen on day one by Dr. So-and-so. That counts a hell of a lot more than it counts from an officer as well, and then that way we're only doing it on day 10 if we can't get them to bring it in. So you could even use that as a bargaining, saying, hey, listen, we usually impound the animal, and it costs $7 a day or $25 a day or whatever it is. This is what we'll do. You bring the animal to us on day 1. We'll send you back, to do the home quarantine. And then on day 10, you bring them back and we clear them. No officer ever has to go out there. Now, if the dog is dangerous, if it's a severe bite, high profile bite, you may want to consider having the animal in your custody. There are benefits. But I think for the great majority of bite cases we deal with, we can do the home quarantine and save, it's not really a revenue generator for the shelter anyway. A lot of places would say, well, we need that money and we charge them X amount of blah, blah, blah. It's like, the money we charge them doesn't cover the cost for us anyway. It never does,
Yeah.
And it doesn't generate enough money to justify the negative impact it has on shelter population, shelter staff. And like you said, you end up having to euthanize them because they can't come back and claim them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Wholeheartedly recommend that. Sure. And if Memphis does want to start doing stop responding to run-of-the-mill running at large calls, let me know. I'll help you guys work on a strategy. I'd love to be a part of that.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. Are there any other questions?
Not for me.
Okay, great.
Okay, we're down to our last couple of minutes. Is there anyone else on the call that wants to make sure that we get your questions answered for Scott? Feel free to go ahead and post your question in the question area, and we'll make sure to get them to him in the last couple of minutes. In the meantime, while we're waiting to see if there's any other questions that come in, just want to reiterate how much we appreciate you taking this hour of your time, and we hope that this was really helpful, and we're continuing to do more of these. We have a digital fundraising one that we're doing in September. It's always the third Thursday of the month at the same time, 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So we hope that you'll continue to join us for these. We always record them. So after today's presentation, just a reminder that you will get an automatic follow-up email that includes a recording of this session with the Q&A and everything. In addition to that, we will post the presentation with some of the updated slides that Scott referred to, as well as the article that he wrote with Chameleon. We're going to try to get you a copy of that as well. So if there aren't any other questions, you can see on the screen there that Scott's provided his contact information for those of you that would like to reach out individually on any particular things that you'd like to work on within your organizations. And again, we just appreciate you being here so much. We're grateful that we have Scott, even sitting in Alaska, coming to share live with you his expertise. So he was just out whale watching and now he's here with you. So pretty amazing. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a really wonderful rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. And my email's there. Anything you guys need, feel free, shoot me an email. I'm more than happy to help. My goal is to make sure that animal control across the country is doing the best job that they can and making it making it easier for everybody to do the right job. So I'm only happy to help.
Love it. Thanks, Scott, so much.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye. Have a great day.
Bye. Bye now.